sense, you will have to prioritize, and that is very important aspect, because when we are working for Vision 2047, there are a lot of uncertainties are also involved. So there are certain things about which we are sure about. There are certain things where we have high level of confidence, but there are certain things where we may have low level of confidence, but those may also be unavoidable. So this session is going to help us identify the key, I would say, nuts and bolts that should be cautious about, where we will be drawing the roadmap. We should be careful that those things should not miss out, or something should not be overemphasized or underemphasized. So the experts who are having the wide range of exposure, dealing with different kind of the sectoral dimensions, not only disaster risk management but other sectors also, because disaster risk reduction is highly interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and multi-sectoral approach is very much needed in promoting disaster risk reduction. So this panel will be chaired by none other than Professor V.K. Sharma Saab, Vice Chairman, Sikkim State Disaster Management Authority, who is also the Senior Professor of IIPA and has been the Subhash Chandra Bose Awardee for Disaster Management, has been honored by the Honorable Prime Minister the last year on the Jayanti of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. I invite Professor Sharma to please grace the dais, and welcome to him. We have the august panel of guests. We have Srimati B.V. Uma Devi, who has just superannuated from the position of Additional Secretary Disaster Management. He has been our senior guide supervisor in the Ministry of Home Affairs, but beside that she has also had a long inning in the Ministry of Environment and Forests. So the theme of the program, Resilience and Sustainability, which is talking about the joining of the two fraternities, the environmental aspects, climate change related dimensions, and then integrated into disaster risk management. So she is one of the best example of this integration. I invite her to the dais, madam. Let us welcome her. Professor S.P. Singh. Professor S.P. Singh, sir, former Vice Chancellor of Kumayu University, Nainital. May I invite Professor S.P. Singh, sir? Sir. Professor S.P. Singh, sir, is one of the noted scientists of India. He has been Fellow of National Academy. He has been internationally referred as one of the noted ecologists from India. His contributions in the area of landslides, other Himalayan ecosystems, and their integration of these issues in disaster risk reduction is very important. He guided a lot of researches after Uttarakhand tragedy also. He has also been a ICFRE chair professor in Forest Research Institute, Dehradun, and he has promoted a lot of such work. So we welcome you, sir, on the dais. We welcome Dr. Madhukar Gupta. Dr. Madhukar Gupta has been working in the area of disaster management at several fronts. We know his contribution for past, I know personally 16, 17 years. I met him first in 2007 when he was Divisional Commissioner of Jaipur, and that time we had lot of discussions, and then he has been, he is also having lot of interest in academic dimensions of disaster management and development management otherwise, and presently he is the Election Commissioner of Government of Rajasthan. I welcome you, sir. We also welcome Dr. BMS Rathore, IC Mode, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. The headquarters is in Kathmandu, Nepal, is one of our key partners, not only in organizing this summit, but otherwise also have been collaborating with NIDM in several fronts. Ministry of Environment and Forests is the nodal ministry from Government of India side for EC Mode. Professor BMS Rathore has a long inning of experience, has been working in several fronts. He also has been on secondment to various international agencies and he is presently the Policy Fellow of ICIMOD. He was also the Joint Secretary of Ministry of Environment and Forest when actually we started talking about climate change integration with disaster management. So he has always been very supportive to our endeavors. So we welcome you. In fact, the Director General of ICIMOD also wanted to join, but they have a board meeting today. So being the custodian of the institution, being the head of the institution, he has to be there. So he had sent a video message. So we'll be playing his message also during his session for the audience. So before I request the other panelists, I would like to request the chairperson of this session, Professor V.K. Sharma, who is one of the pioneers of disaster management in this country, who is also one of the real, I would say that, the integration of environment and disaster management and administration, because he has been working with Indian Institute of Public Administration. He rose from the environment background, and he is vice chairman of Sikkim Disaster Management Authority, besides being one of the pioneers and promoting NIDM's birth also. That goes to his credit. So over to you, Professor Sharma, for your opening remarks as chair, and then I would request you to kindly proceed, take the proceedings of the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Gupta, and I welcome, esteemed panelists. I can see that we have a very good mix, of the policy makers, implementers, academicians, and from international agencies. So I think this session you will be hearing, from different angle. In opening remarks, I will say one thing, that this is the session for recommendations. And in recommendations, I will say that when Sindai framework was formed, or we signed Sindai framework in 2015, I think our focus was up to 2030, because it was for 15 years. Sustainable Development Goal, they were also for 15 years. Climate change, 2015 there was Paris Agreement, and we were thinking that what we can achieve, up to in 15 years. So the vision was up to 15 years. Then our Honorable Prime Minister, he thought that let us think of 100 years, when we become independent, and 2047. So I think this is again a very important this thing, that we should have a vision of 2047. He has also given us, a sort of guideline that by 2070, India will be carbon neutral. And this target, which is given by Honorable Prime Minister, we are also working on that. So I will request my panelists that when they talk about, recommendations, they will keep, all the three things into consideration. I remember when Sindai framework was there, Bihar and Sikkim, they were the two states, we immediately had a state-level workshop, and we make agenda, that in 15 years, what we will be doing. Now, 2047, as I was saying this morning, that now we will be having agenda that where we want to, what we want to achieve, in another 25 years from today. At the same time, we should think much longer also, that carbon neutrality in 2070, which is the target which is given by our leader. So I think this is another important feature which is there with the scientists, with the, so the panelists, they will talk on, because there I can see the, wealth of experience which is here with me. I know Professor S.P. Singh, my esteemed, colleague and well-known scientist, ecologist, I should say. and his vision that ecology and disaster risk, they go hand in hand. You do environmental mismanagement and you see the brunt of nature. I am having two very experienced bureaucrats, and Umaji is, fortunately she is a forester and her training is forestry, so her knowledge is environment. She was in Ministry of Environment and she was in Ministry of Home Affairs. She knows, the government policies, that what we are planning from Home Ministry point of view, from NDMA point of view, so her perspective. Madhukar Gupta ji, because he belonged to Rajasthan cadre, he was Secretary to Government of India, and throughout his career, he was with UNDP, he was with disaster management is very close to his heart. And there are reasons for that. Wherever, he started as SDM or, district magistrate or, he faced, the droughts and the slow, pace disaster which can have impact on the economy, on the whole state. And in fact, I learned a lot from him. He's a very knowledgeable person, very down to earth, and one officer, who always used his knowledge of disaster risk reduction wherever he was. And then we have from ECMOD, which is one organization which is dealing with all Himalayan states. They have a bigger, vision, and particularly on Himalaya, their knowledge is enormous. They have done, basic research, fundamental research. They are cooperating with the governments as well as non-governmental organizations, with academic organizations. And this is one organization which is having very good knowledge of Himalaya, I should say. And Himalaya is very important when we talk about environment, when we talk about disaster risk reduction. I think there is importance of Himalaya. So I think the bigger vision will come from Dr. Rathore, because he is serving in EC mode since long time. And we were having, many Indians working with EC mode. When I was in Nepal, I visited EC mode several times, and I know the capacity and capability of this organization. I am so glad that you are here, this morning. Without wasting any time, because the time is very precious, and I have very, very good panel. And my job will be that first of all, I invite them for a few minutes, of their vision, and then add, knowledge of our participants, because participants are also very knowledgeable, and some of the good recommendations will flow, from your side as well. So without wasting any time, I will request first of all, my left, Mrs. B.V. Uma Devi. She was, as I already mentioned, she was with the Home Ministry as Additional Secretary, and so she will speak on government perspective and her, recommendations for 2047. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Very good afternoon to all of you. It's a great opportunity for me. Let me first thank NIDM for inviting me for this very important conference. Although I could not attend last 2 days' sessions, but with my whatever little knowledge I have on disaster management and DRR, I'll try to deliberate on the recommendations. So as rightly said by the Chair, India has actually taken a lot of policy initiatives on disaster management as well as disaster risk reduction. Whether it is, we started with changing our approach to disaster management from relief-centric approach to a very holistic approach of involving prevention, mitigation, and then preparedness, then response, and then relief and recovery and reconstruction also. So to implement this, now we also have funding from, based on the recommendations of the 15 Finance Commission, we do have funding for mitigation. And then we have established CDRI, the Coalition for Disaster Risk Infrastructure. Then we have the Sendai framework, which Chair did mention, and we are also, in the midway of the Sendai framework, which we will be reviewing, doing a midterm review of the Sendai framework. Then we have the SDGs. Then we have the Prime Minister 10-point agenda on the disaster risk reduction, the Paris Agreement. So there's so many initiatives, policy initiatives have already been taken by our country. And but yes, whether these policies are being implemented or not is the question. So I believe the 2 days you had very good deliberations, and a lot of very valuable points emerged. And one of the very important point, which was mentioned in the morning also, about the localization of planning and implementation. So we do have planning at the national level. The disaster management plans are being prepared. We also have the plans sectorally made by various ministries. And we're also envisaging, the plans to be made at the state level. So it is very much required and recommended that these plans are made at the local level also. Just I was watching some of the videos of the previous days' deliberations, wherein there were representatives of the Panchayat Raj institution, ministry, wherein we have around 2 lakh Panchayat Raj governance, local governance institutions, wherein I think we need to involve them in disaster management plans, and we should have local level disaster management plans, and also the climate action plan. Although there are some states which are doing very well, as mentioned by the chair in today's morning session on Sikkim. Sikkim is doing extremely well at the local disaster management plans and planning. And we also have, the Government of India has launched recently a community disaster involvement of communities in disaster management, that is the Apada Mitra scheme, which was mentioned by some of the speakers yesterday also. But yes, we are doing it on a very small scale, but this needs to be scaled up. And we need to build up the capacities of the local communities in disaster management as well as disaster risk reduction. There is a very urgent need to strengthen the DDMAs, the district disaster management authorities, which are the key institutions at the district level to implement all these, whether it is the sectoral plans or whether the disaster management plan or the climate resilient plan. Everything has to be trickled down to the village as well as the district disaster management authority. As of now, even our state disaster management authorities are not fully functional. So these need to be strengthened. So, and then another very important session was on loss and damage. While there is a positive development in the last COP in Egypt on financing for loss and damages, so we should not lose a focus on the mitigation and on prevention and preparedness. Just because we're getting funding for loss and damages. So our recovery plans should focus on the resilient infrastructure, the disaster risk reduction strategies, so that the disasters are minimized in future. And NDMA is also in the process of developing various disaster-specific national programs, whether it's on earthquakes or landslides or several others there in the process, and forest fires. So they should take the local and regional context in account while preparing these programs. Another very important issue which emerged about on the compliance of the bylaws and then mainstreaming of the DRR, the disaster risk reduction in development process, which was discussed in the details, also in the morning session on sectoral approach. So as regarding housing, yes, if DRRs can be made part of the existing schemes like Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, to some extent we'll be able to mainstream DRR in the housing sector at least. Then also, if we can have a mission on disaster resilient housing, wherein we can use the disaster resistant construction material, we can have the solar energy, the non-conventional energy sources, all put together in coming up with housing which is disaster resilient. As far as agriculture is concerned, yes, we did speak about in the morning about use of, disaster resilient species, the promotion of agrobiodiversity, the wild species, which are a large number of species are very resilient to the drought as well as, the high temperatures and cold and frost. So if these can be promoted, it will be quite useful. And another very important issue is use of technology in disaster risk reduction. We already have the common alert protocol for early warning system, and if we can upgrade it to, to using other new technologies like cell broadcast, and also using the best practices of the other countries. And there has been a lot of improvement in forecasting in our country over the last few years, and we need to again take use of the best practices of what's happening in other countries on the geospatial technologies or the forecasting. Today morning someone did talk about the forecasting or the predictions or talking about the vulnerability in 2047. So we can use the new technologies like the climate modeling and come up with the disaster risk vulnerability of 2047 using that. So we need to upgrade the technologies, use of new technologies and disaster risk reduction. So another very important aspect is the climate-related disasters. Yes, there was a mention about our, the goal of reaching net zero by 2070. We already have a national action plan, but the states also are in the process of preparing these action plans. But again, it should trickle down to the local, till the village level. And yesterday they were talking about one panchayat where the Gram Panchayat is also talking about energy, low energy technologies at the local level. And use of non-conventional energy sources for irrigation, like use of solar and wind power, and for pumps, etc. And then somebody talked about waste to energy. And the last but not the least, I would like to mention about the nature-based solutions to climate change and disaster risk reduction. And the last one, which I would like to speak about, the lifestyle for environment. We need to create a lot of awareness on this lifestyle for environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Umaji. I mean, you have touched almost every aspect, and initiatives which are being taken by Government of India and by state governments, and you have touched upon, the community level initiative which is started by NDMA, and I think in coming days the importance of such initiatives will be seen. Thank you very much. That in nutshell, you could give the government perspective and about the plans. I remember that after Sindai framework, immediately we were having a national disaster management plan, but after 2015, when Sindai framework came, immediately, the national plan was updated, and another plan was available in 2016. Similarly, when Prime Minister gave 10 points, in Asian conference, all the points, were accommodated in the national plan, as well as they become focus agenda, in each and every state plan. So thank you very much for highlighting all these things. We have with us Professor S.P. Singh, and I told you, legend and a very senior professor of environment, former vice chancellor, and he has guided, us in disaster risk reduction. We are, guided by him in several aspects, and particularly on climate change, its impact, and relationship of climate change and DRR. I think there cannot be a better person than you, sir. So over to you, sir.
So many kind words. Thank you so much. I don't know whether I deserve them or not. Dr. Anil Gupta, he also referred to me in many ways. I'm really thankful to all of them. They enabled me to share some of the things which would be based largely or mostly on Himalaya in my case. I was talking with Dr. Rathore that Himalaya is inherently vulnerable to landslides and landslips, even if there is no human being. They are young mountains, they are rising, continuously rising. So it is an inherently vulnerable area as far as landslide, what you call disaster is concerned. It is called multiple hazard environment of the, world, where you have almost everything. An earthquake takes place, it doesn't stop that, then it leads to landslides. I remember that in Nepal, when the earthquake took place, it led to thousands of landslides. The overall area was over 90 kilometers square. So then you have droughts, you have flood, and then drought also. So what is happening that during pre-monsoon, you have fire in much of the Himalayan region. And this is escalating because of the temperature rise and because there is a less dependence of local people on biomass. So fuel is also accumulating. So these changes are going to take place, and maybe all these years the fires are very small. But that fire, that may be, in future, it can be disastrous level of the fire. So we need to have not only understanding of the monsoon, we should have also understanding of the pre-monsoon conditions. Means how severe is going to be drought in a given area if we want to really manage our fire or take preventive. So my first recommendation, I would suggest that let's declare Himalaya, as you say, in ecosystem mission way, that it should be declared a kind of, permanently disaster-prone area. It can't be treated by, simply by one incident, or then you stop and then Joshimachi, for example, is one example. Then you have several other cities which are in problem. Nainital itself is a serious problem. So my point is that next recommendation, I would suggest that let's have an assessment of most of the cities of Himalaya with regard to disaster, with regard to the vulnerability of the constructions are there and so on, and plan also for future. Now Himalaya is a land scarce area. So we need to plan the cities in view of stability of slopes. Means we need to create some, there should be mapping or some assessment right from now, so that the people who are displaced from one problem to or another problem, they should have a space where safely they can be placed. So my submission is that second recommendation could be that let's have assessment of stable areas with some water where cities should be created. If you look at the history of Himalaya, most of the cities are British time cities, whichever are known. We never created a good city. It's a really unfortunate situation. When I was Vice Chancellor, I said that let's declare that we would create a city. That they didn't declare that they would have a city. So my point is that Himalaya needs to have not only, we should visit all the cities, have a better assessment. It should belong, and then we should have also, indicate where cities in future should be created. It should not be hazard. It's not, there's no process, in fact. It is happening simply. So these are very serious issues in the sense that Himalaya should be declared land scarce area, which every piece of land should have a value, and that should be planned that way. ECMOD has taken the initiative, what they call it, transboundary cooperation, or that should be, it has been there. They have taken initiative, but I think the response has not been that strong. So this cooperation among the countries should be taken to another level, because when there's a GLOF located in Nepal, that may affect India, or GLOF in Tibet may affect Nepal. So there are interconnections. These problems don't know the boundaries of political boundaries. So when we in climate change, China and India have some similar ideas in many things. Why can't the warring countries in Himalaya, even if they have some conflicts, they can have better cooperation? So we should recommend that the cooperation should be raised to another level. And it should not come only from this mod. Others should also say, yes, look here. They should, in fact, make their organization, ECMOD, should be would become more interested if you take lead. So India should take lead because India, as far as area is concerned, we don't have much area in Himalaya, or very small fraction. But from population point of view, we are number one Himalayan country. Please remember it. Our population point of view, we are number one Himalayan country. So that should not be ignored. And that should be seen that way. So next is that one of the biggest culprits nowadays people are talking about is the road. Road means landslide, road means debris, road is problem also, road is good thing also. So we need roads. And so because of defense factor, because of other factors, we can't ignore, we can't say sacrifice all those factors as the country is concerned. But we need to invest much more than we are investing as far as Himalayan roads are concerned. They should be ecologically sound. So that it is possible in America, this kind of things is being said, that can roads be converted into something ecologically, safe places where biodiversity can be managed, where some livelihood issues can be connected. So we should take enough steps. This can be another policy change point, that so that the roads are not culprits. Roads are declared something which are better things from ecology point of view, as well as biodiversity factors. Please remember that, especially in India, we are not going to have enough food as far as Himalaya is concerned. Food has to come from there. But there should be some self-sufficiency so that the dependence is not entire. Unfortunately, especially in Uttarakhand state, people are leaving mountains. Agriculture is going to be a problem. Those factors, I'm saying we should have some plan for that. Otherwise, it may lead to some very serious issue in the future. We should really assess what is the scale of depopulation. Means migration is a good thing, but migration which leads to depopulation, that hurts, especially a state like Uttarakhand. So we need to think about that, because that is the area where we have boundaries of the international boundaries. We need some people there. We need to, otherwise we will have to spend a lot of money to take people to those places again. So let's do something so that in those areas people, what I call hazard environment should be reduced to such an extent that people start spending more time. Then tourism should be, the scale is huge, about 5 to 6 crore persons alone in Uttarakhand every year. So that tourism should be much more managed. Do you know that even Everest has a problem? There was a jam in Everest of the climbers. And now the base camp of Everest is being displaced to a safer side. So that kind of tourism, which leads to such an extent that Everest has a problem of people, should be really analyzed properly. Have I time?
Yeah,
We do a lot of EI exercises, sorry. Almost every plan, every dam, everything it has the EI exercise. We should write something, I don't know what you can write in recommendation, that rigor should be established. There's no rigor as far as EI is done. EI is something everybody is paid for that, and then it is done. And nobody believes that EI was done in, say, proper way. What should be done? What should be our recommendation? I don't know. But there should be something. We should apply our mind that Himalaya is a very common area where every time you have EIA. And then remember that when you have dams at the high altitude areas, there's a phenomenon called elevation dependent warming. The areas in Himalaya are much more warmer and higher, they're getting warmer at higher rate than the lower portions. So means the changes are much more faster in higher elevations, and the precipitation behavior is more violent. It can be very violent temporarily, and those things lead to what you call tunnel-like situations, the problems and so on. So the dams in some way, at some elevations, should not be created. It should not be established. That kind of declaration should be made. I mean, so you can have dams where things are better, but not at the, say, where you know that it is going to be very vulnerable. Then finally, I have already taken, I think, more time. Landslide, say, restoration, science should be developed. It should be biotechnology type of thing. Means you need to restore land after degradation. I remember that we did some exercise in 1980s, 85, 80, 90. After that, this knowledge didn't increase. Nobody else did. You know, there is a species called alder, Alnus nepalensis, which is to such an extent associated with landslide that people think that it is the cause of landslide. Fact is that it colonizes the landslide area. Such a species can be used, and a science can be developed in which ecology plus technology, engineering can be combined. And this should be one of the agenda as far as research is concerned. So let me, I think I have used some points. I have not explained all of them, but I would say that these are some of the recommendation points that which might be considered, might be useful, you think. But you should start with that. Let's declare Himalaya as a, say, inherently disaster-prone area. Means a lot of things. Means that the planning and all those factors should be changed accordingly. Thank you so much for giving me more time.
Thank you very much. And I know, how difficult is, for a professor to speak for 5 minutes and give everything. So thank you very much, Professor, that in a nutshell, you could raise some of very important issues of Himalaya. I fully agree with you that Himalaya is a very, very sensitive ecological system, and this is, known to us. And from disaster point of view also, I think Himalaya, which is the third pole, which is having more than 5,000 glaciers, which is, water tower, third water tower.
Biodiversity center.
That's right, sir. So I think Himalaya is very important to us, and that's why you have raised a very important thing. Similarly, when you see the IPCC report, they are saying that even the coastal area, and coastal areas are equally sensitive, and with climate change, there will be impact on. So, sir, I think
even coastal areas are getting affected by Himalaya.
By Himalaya,
Glacier melt.
that's right. By
Glacier melt and water, all those things are going to appear. So there is a lot of connection between the two.
So I think these three sensitive reasons, they should be taken, and I think NDMA and the states which are dealing with this, they are keeping this thing in mind. that about the vulnerability and the plans, you know, the district plan or the community level plan, they should be based accordingly. But thank you very much, you know, for raising issues about the new disasters which are coming up, like forest fire, like, you know, which was not earlier that frequent, which is,
Small fire was a good thing,
yeah, but
now it may lead to bigger fire,
bigger-
that will be like American style.
that's right. So, sir, now we have another, you know, policy maker and who was with the UN system, as I told you, who is, you know, part of Indian administrative system. He was with the Rajasthan state, you know, because belonged to Rajasthan state. Dr. Madhukar Gupta ji, he is an academician, he is an administrator, he is, you know, all in one, I should say. And his words of wisdom, and particularly for disasters like drought, like, you know, slow pacing disasters, which is affecting us, you know, every day. I think that will be very important. But up to you, sir. You have vast experience of disaster management.
VK and I have been partners in crime for a long time, more than 20 years. My biggest regret in life has been that nobody took me seriously, including my wife. So we've been saying different things to the government also. Government means government at the national state levels. I'm very happy about today's session that I'm sharing this dais with VK, as we call him, also in the presence of Dr. Anil Gupta. 2001, I won't take much time, I'll just focus on what needs to be done. करना क्या है? बात बहुत होती है, हम करते कम हैं. What needs to be, what is the roadmap for the future, according to my perception? I'll focus on our plans, strategies, policies, and act for mitigation and management of all kinds of disasters. 2001, I had just come back from Gujarat after spending 2 months. I was put down by the UNDP on the first day of the disaster itself. And they said, you be there for a week, and that week never came. So I was kept there for 2 months. And when we came back, the government of India gave a mandate to the UN system that draft a note for what needs to be done. Because tsunami and the Gujarat earthquake were very major disasters, very major and fairly complex. For example, trauma. Trauma was never recognized as an ailment, as a problem before the Gujarat earthquake. So, and I remember when we were sitting in the IAPA and I drafted a note for the creation of an institute like the NIDM. Also, the formulation of policy and an act like the NDMA. In the year 2001, the sad part is NIDM forgot about me. This is the first forum where they have had the graciousness to invite me to talk about my experiences. Anyway, so it happens. So, a lot of satisfaction in triggering off the creation of the NIDM and also the NDMA. But a lot of water has flown in the Ganges, so to say, in the last more than 20 years. A lot has been done, but a lot still needs to be done. Look at Joshimath. I've been on a few TV shows. Same questions. Same questions which we heard 20 years earlier. Why? What is the point in all this talk? Are we better off? when I was handling the drought in Rajasthan, I sent one of my officers to get some books, some literature on handling droughts, famines. So we got hold of this book written by Amartya Sen, who later on was my professor at Harvard. So we got his book on famines, and he talks about entitlements. In a water scarce situation, water scarcity could be of any magnitude. It could be a drought, a pre-drought situation, or a famine, an extreme situation. Fortunately, we've not had many famine events in our country post-independence. So now, what are the entitlements? When we were handling droughts in Rajasthan, what are the entitlements of, let's say, a pregnant woman, of a disabled, of a child, of an old person? We still haven't spelled out the entitlements in whatever legislation that we passed. Why should it take so much of time? And believe me, when I came to the UNDP, and I was trying to formulate, as I said earlier, a plan, a policy strategy, and a Drought Mitigation and Management Act. When I looked around, I found these things already existed. At that point in time, 43 states out of 50 in the US had Drought Mitigation and Management Acts. Even today, we don't have it. We still depend on old famine codes, which are antiquated. Why? Why so much of only inbreeding? Why do we refuse to learn from other countries? Why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? At what cost? Something which is already sitting there, why not adapt it to our situation? As I said, entitlements. I remember when I went to Professor Amartya Sen to let me into his class, he wouldn't let me in. He said, you have no background in economics. And when I tempted him with my experience on his book and what we did after reading that book, he said, all right, you come into my class. So something which has been discussed in theory, and that is where the role of academics is so important in managing disasters. Talking about disasters could be a routine matter in other countries, not in a country like India or in the Indian subcontinent. We are 25% in the Indian subcontinent in the world. 25% of the world's population sits here in the Indian subcontinent. And when we build capacities in India, we also need to look at other SAARC countries. They do not have that capacity, a country like Maldives. So can we help them? Sri Lanka. So when we build our capacities, we also need to look at our neighbors in terms of South-South cooperation or SAARC cooperation. Joshimath, again, role plays, who does what? We need to clearly spell out what are the role plays of which actor in which disaster. I remember back from the UN, when I joined the state government, we made a district disaster management plan. Most of the districts have a disaster management plan now, but we made a template, we made a presentation which would take about 35-40 minutes for natural and man-made disasters and simulated more than 30 disasters. And that template was used in the Kashmir earthquake by Pakistan for developing their disaster management plans. So, what are the role plays at the national level, state level, and at the local levels? It should be clearly spelled out, and they should be disaster specific. Joshimath, again, who will do what? Why these questions again and again? What have we learned in the last so many years? Also, national calamity, state calamity, we define very clearly when the trigger has to become operational. What is the trigger for declaring national calamity, whether it's famine or it's floods, whatever? Should we look at disaster has already taken place, impending disaster. As Professor said earlier, it's an eco-fragile zone. Anything else can happen. What are we waiting for? Still, who does what? Paramilitary forces, NDRF. who does what again. So role plays have to be clearly defined because time is extremely important. In the Gujarat earthquake, finally when we did a number count, we lost somewhere close to 20,000 people. Now, could we have reduced that number? Could we have reduced the number of people who were grievously hurt? And as I said earlier, it's not like any other country where we are a highly population dense country, and even small disasters trigger off big losses of life and property. So we have a big stake in managing disasters. So basically we have to move to prevention. How do we anticipate, prevent, mitigate? How do we prepare for disasters? And every time, why should the government pay for droughts? Why can't insurance agencies pay? So the government can have a role in paying their premiums. And whenever, as and when a drought takes place or water scarcity takes place or crops fail, the insurance companies, according to whatever contracts they have to pitch in. So it should be automatic. It should be according to the Act. It should be laid out in the Act itself. Now, you have NCC, NSS, Scouts and Guides, you have ex-servicemen, Panchayati Raj institutions, you have different players everywhere in the country. Can we have a database? Whenever a disaster takes place or in a disaster-like situation, even, we are sitting in an area, we are surrounded by neighbors who are hostile towards us. And we need to be prepared all the time. Anything can happen anytime. So in addition to man-made disasters, we also need to anticipate, in addition to natural disasters, we also need to anticipate man-made disasters, man-made emergencies. Now, every village, every township, we need to have a database of people whom we can just call up on the cell phone and say that, well, come here, meet us at this place. A very interesting example, again, I like to share. And as we were discussing hazards, now hazards are there. We can reduce hazards, but then can we insulate ourselves to the extent possible against hazards? The classic example is of a village headman in the South Arcot district in Tamil Nadu, where out of a passion, or it could be whatever, he trained everyone in his village to swim. It was a coastal village. And when the tsunami took place, only 8 people lost their lives at that village because everyone knew how to swim. So that's how they insulated themselves against an impending disaster, cyclones, whatever. So, and a lot of these things have to be remote sensing. We have a huge digital database. In the year 2000 itself, we started talking to ISRO, the UN system also. We were trying to tell them that build capacities of the lower officials, of Panchayati Raj representatives to read digital data, to make their development plans in such a way that they maximize the return on investment. Also, they reduce disaster risk to the maximum. कहने को बहुत कुछ है अगर कहने पे आए, but I think I'll stop at this. A lot can be said, so this is something which I'm passionate about. But again, thank you for giving this platform to me. Thank you.
In fact, very important issues, like insurance. And one thing, I should mention here to you that Madhukar Gupta ji was instrumental in making CSR, funds when he was in Ministry of Corporate Affairs, available for DRR activities. So I think he played very important role in it. I feel guilty because he asked me several times, to prepare a sort of guidelines or something for the corporate sector, because the role of private sector is not that, actively used, I should say, in disaster risk reduction. But this is my fault, you raised this many times to me. So thank you very much. You raised many things, but the time constraint is there. I am coming directly to a very, learned person, Dr. Rathore, who is Senior Policy Advisor in EC Mode. And as I told you that EC Mode plays a very important role in Himalaya. So over to you, sir. And time is the constraint. I will request you to be, very brief. Maybe here, maybe on.
Yeah.
This is up to you, sir.
Well, thank you, Chair. We have a small video from the Director General, if it can be played. And
Yeah,
if there's anything time left, then I'll supplement and pick up few points for recommendations. Thanks.
Okay, sure.
Honorable Chair, distinguished speakers and participants, I am honored to be invited to speak at this important session on sectoral approach and regional context to resilience of the RESSUMMIT 2047. While I consider this event to be of high relevance and importance to ICIMOD, I regret that due to prior commitments which I could not shift, I am unable to join you in person. ICIMOD, the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, is a unique organization dedicated to mountain people and environment. It is a regional intergovernmental organization owned and governed by its 8 member countries, which encompasses the Hindu Kush Himalayan region: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, China, India, Myanmar, Nepal, and Pakistan. As a key member country, India has always been extending full support to ICIMOD through the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, which serves as our nodal ministry. ICIMOD attaches great importance to further strengthening our cooperation with the National Institute of Disaster Management as disasters, both climate-induced and otherwise, have become more frequent and intense in recent years. The Hindu Kush Himalayan region is recognized as one of the most vulnerable areas to climate change, with warming taking place at a much faster rate, affecting the fragile mountain ecosystems and thereby the safety and well-being of millions of people dependent on them. Exposure to hazards can extend, though with a time lag, to an area much larger than the site of the primary event, often crossing international borders. For example, the Koshi River flooding in Nepal impacts the dense population in Bihar, India. Therefore, it is important to understand the upstream and downstream linkages of hazard events within the country and beyond. The multi-hazard environment is also common in many countries of the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. There are many examples of compounding and cascading hazards, with events such as the Melamchi flood in Nepal in June 2021 causing destruction to the newly built Melamchi water supply project, a project of national pride in Nepal, and the Chamoli flood in February 2021 in India that impacted many people and infrastructure downstream. These events have shown that while a sectoral approach to building disaster resilience is important, there is a need for a multi-hazard, intersectoral approach to tackle this type of risk in an effective manner. Learning from and understanding how best practices like formal and informal early warning systems currently being implemented in some areas of work and assessing their potential for scaling up deserve important considerations in moving forward. Scientific reports show that natural hazards and instances previously found in high mountain areas are also occurring in new areas that have never previously faced them, indicating that these risks are becoming more widespread and transboundary in nature. Therefore, understanding the science behind climate change is key for informed decision-making and should be a priority as we move forward. Harnessing technology is important for responding to these new types of hazards, which could include new early warning systems that utilize interrelated data within or between countries, and citizen science initiatives that have been found to be successful. Different countries have different priorities for their adaptation. In a region like ours, resilience should focus on people, especially women, children, the poor, the elderly, and the vulnerable. Local communities' voices need to be heard in the planning and policy-making processes, and they should be backed up with science and evidence-based information. Sharing knowledge in a high-level platform such as this summit should be a priority within and across states of a nation, as well as between countries in a region and across regions, in order to harness best knowledge, innovations, and practices. We are happy to note that COP27 has given high priority to loss and damage, and a special fund is set aside for the same. However, to translate these pledges into reality, there is a need for a united effort from our region so that loss and damages caused by transboundary disasters are duly accounted for. ICIMOD has just launched a new strategy, Strategy 2030, that is aimed at making the center more robust and agile in responding to the priorities of our regional member countries in addressing the major challenges that the region is facing in the wake of climate change and other drivers. One of the key priorities flagged in our Strategy 2030 is transboundary disaster risk reduction and building resilience. We will be monitoring changes in snow and ice bodies, glaciers and glacial lakes to assess the risk from glacial lake outburst floods, globs as we call them, and changing water flow patterns in our rivers. We will be looking at disasters triggered by unsustainable land use practices and haphazard infrastructure development, particularly mountain roads. We will also monitor disasters caused by unpredictable and extreme weather patterns such as unseasonal monsoon rainfall, storms and droughts, and their impacts on agriculture, economy, and human settlements. We are aware that India, under the Honorable Prime Minister's 10-point agenda for disaster risk reduction, is taking giant strides to build resilience of communities to disasters. India has the know-how, the resources, and the capacity to deal with disasters, which many countries in the region do not have, particularly smaller countries like Bhutan and Nepal. Therefore, my earnest request for this August gathering is to see how India could play a lead role in advancing our regional approach to deal with disasters. The Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure is a very good way forward. We are confident that as the chair of G20, India could provide the kind of leadership needed to make the region a safer and more secure place for the millions of people in our region that are vulnerable to disasters. ICIMOD, of course, will continue to support and contribute in any way we can towards India's Vision 2047 under the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav by building on its past and ongoing work in testing and demonstrating community-based flood early warning systems, particularly in India and Nepal, on the tributaries of Koshi and Brahmaputra, and in establishing the knowledge networks and flood outlook portals. As an intergovernmental regional organization, ICIMOD looks forward to strengthening its engagement with the concerned ministries and departments of the Government of India, and especially the national and state disaster management authorities for transboundary collaboration on a range of disaster risk reduction issues. I look forward to receiving the outcome of the discussions from this summit and to participate in the planned National Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction meeting in March 2023. Finally, I am confident that our representative at this session, my good friend, Mr. BMS Rathore, Senior Fellow and Policy Advisor of ICIMOD, will effectively represent us and contribute to the discourse on this critical topic. Thank you. Namaste. Honorable Chair, distinguished.
Would you like mention some other, thing in
Just,
1 or 2 minutes?
Yeah, just 2 minutes,
Yeah.
my 2 cents. I think I just want to highlight the DRR is about happiness, and there's a story behind this. I've been looking at this Nepal, India, this Ratu Khola, which drains into Kosi River, and I went to one of the villages where we had installed community-based flood early warning systems. So as we were interacting with a group of women, we heard this, that we are able to sleep better now. Now, to sleep better is about also one of the key dimensions of happiness. And that also triggered the whole idea of looking at this, which DG Isimot was trying to say, that interrelated data and the information systems which needs to be built up. So community-based and also the more formal, including the state-of-art technology which you use for forecasting. So getting the alerts, I think, is very important, and getting the early warning is very important, but there is a transboundaryness in the context of Himalaya, as Dr. S.P. Singh was also, Professor S.P. Singh was also mentioning. I think this factored in. When I looked at this particular story, I got 3 more lessons from this. One is the community-to-community cooperation happens across the borders without any formal systems. So the cooperation is most important as we look at this, the disaster risk reductions, and the regional cooperation, I think, is important. Second is loss and damage. And the lady was saying, the story was telling that we were able, because we got 2 hours of lead time to move our animals, save the property, so the kind of reduction in loss and damage is phenomenal. And there is also angle of Avda Mitra. There was one lady who was trained in running these early warning systems, and the moment she gets this alarm, it goes off, and she's able to communicate through the different modes. So there's an opportunity of creating the employment through the Avda Mitra. So these 3 things. My 2 last points I like to make, which otherwise DG Simot, Dr. Pema Kamso has covered it very widely. One is this issue of, if you're looking at the roadmap 2047, the regional dimensions on the transboundaryness actually must be strongly factored in. I think it came out from the sessions also. And the second and the last point is actually what Professor S.P. Singh has mentioned very nicely about the multi-hazard vulnerability in the Himalayas. So if you look at the SDG 17, is about the coherence in our responses. So the kind of institutional coherence which we need, particularly in an area like Himalayas, cannot be done by looking at who does what. As you were asking about the question, who does what? You need a better institutional coherence and response. And for that, my suggestion would be, we need to really look at this region very, very carefully in terms of hazards and the vulnerability, and create an institutional mechanism. Like the one which we created for the river NGRPA, National Ganga River Basin Authority. I think similarly the Himalayan Authority needs some discussion now at this stage for a better and coordinated response to respond to the challenges. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. In fact, because there is a time constraint, and I can see that I have only 2 minutes, left for this session. I have 2 options. I request you to send recommendation in case you have any, which is not covered by the panelists, by email, to Mr. Gupta, who can as a session chair, I can pass it on to NIDM. Second is that, because all the points, we have already mentioned, and I give mic, to Anil Gupta ji to conclude this session, and request you to have your lunch and come back, to another session. So maybe Professor Gupta, I can see your, problem.
Thank you so much, sir, and for nicely conducting this session. So thanks to Chair Professor V.K. Sharma, sir, and the four learned panelists. I know that the subject is so vast, and if we keep on discussing, it would certainly require a lot of time. And each and every topic that has been discussed here requires a lot more time to discuss in detail. However, we have some schedule in place, and dot at 2:30 we will have to have our valedictory session starting in this hall itself. So I thank all the panelists for their deliberations in this very important session, and in fact we will keep on interacting with you and taking the guidance and support from you in drafting this Vision 2047 also. So when that draft is there, we'll be sharing with you and taking your insights further. Before we close the session, just a moment please. Before we close the session, it is our pride privilege to honor our chairperson and the panelists. So I would request my colleague Surendra Thakur, Joint Director in IDEA, to honor our chairperson of the session, Professor V.K. Sharma ji, with सामने से कर ठाकुर जी. Thank you, Sri Thakur ji. Now I would like to request Professor Rama Pandey from SPA Bhopal. Professor Rama Pandey, madam, is she here near around? Yes. So I would request her to please honor our panelists of the session. Professor S.P. Singh sir. I also request you to honor Madam B.V. Uma Devi, former Additional Secretary, Government of India, Disaster Management. Thank you, Professor Rama. Now I would like to invite Dr. Shrija Nair, Senior Consultant of NDMA, to honor the two panelists. Shrija, please. I would request you to honor Dr. Madhukar Gupta ji, the Election Commissioner of Rajasthan, for the panel. I request you to honor Dr. B.M.S. Rathod sahab also. Please look at that side. The camera is that side. Thank you, Dr. Srija. Thank you. Thank you. With this, I thank you all for conducting the session very nicely. And I have a special request to you all. Kindly join for lunch, which is arranged on the foyer. But this time, we have lesser time. We have 40 minutes to finish our lunch. And I would request that we be here before 2:25, because 2:30 sharply we will be closing the doors for valedictory session. So by 2:25, it's my request that we all are here. Before, I would request for a group photo. Yeah, and I would request Dr. Rama Pandey, Dr. Shrija Nair, and एक और थे ना सर आइए अब लास्ट डे थोड़ा आइए
This is for your kind information that lunch is arranged. You had